Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this important virtual event as we launch a new citizen-led organization focused on addressing the PFAS contamination crisis that has impacted the water and other resources of communities across our state and region. My name is Tony Spaniola. Since 2016, I've been working with my friends and neighbors in Oscoda, Michigan, community leaders from across the country, environmental and conservation organizations, scientists, health experts, and the media to raise awareness of the PFAS crisis, to advocate for action from our state and federal government and elected officials. This all began for me when I learned that my family cannot drink the water from our private well in Oscoda, and that we cannot even touch the PFAS contaminated foam on our lake and its shorelines. Unfortunately, my story is not unique. Communities across our state in virtually every region, from Belmont to Traverse City, to Ann Arbor, to Alpena, Flint, Grayling, Dearborn, and Detroit, and on, are grappling with contamination from these same chemicals. PFAS is an acronym that stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. They are a class of more than 7,000 different but related chemicals. Beginning in the 1940s, PFAS have been used in numerous products like stain and water-resistant fabrics, cleaning products, paints, and firefighting foam. They are commonly referred to as forever chemicals because they have extremely long half-lives and stay with us for decades. And they are also linked to a wide array of health problems like thyroid issues, various cancers, autoimmune disorders, and more. These substances are toxic to humans and wildlife. According to the state of Michigan, there are more than 11,000 potential PFAS contaminated sites in Michigan alone. PFAS chemicals have been detected in the drinking water of nearly 2 million Michiganders and in every one of the Great Lakes. A recent study indicated that PFAS is literally falling from the sky in rainfall throughout the Great Lakes. Perhaps most alarmingly, virtually every human being has PFAS in their blood. PFAS contamination impacts people and communities across the entire Great Lakes region. It's a growing crisis that requires urgent action, driven by those who know it best, the people who live with it and experience its consequences every day. Our mission is to harness the collective resources, perspectives, and expertise in PFAS-impacted communities and to bring once marginalized people in those communities to the forefront of action on PFAS. That's why we're here today. The Great Lakes PFAS Action Network is a coalition of people and communities impacted by PFAS contamination, joined together with environmental and conservation organizations to create a unified voice for strong protective policies that protect communities, people, and wildlife from PFAS. We will be driven by community leaders to provide tools and resources for communities grappling with PFAS contamination from top PFAS experts, empowering them to hold polluters responsible and seek cleanup solutions for the contamination, to remove PFAS chemicals from commerce, and to bring treatment and relief to those who are suffering from PFAS exposures. We stand here today with the support from our partners, the Michigan League of Conservation Voters Education Fund, the Ecology Center, the National Wildlife Federation, and Need Our Water now in Oscoda. Over the next months, we will be developing a policy agenda for PFAS that is informed and built by the communities that are impacted to address this crisis. It is absolutely essential to have impacted communities at the table and at the forefront of discussions when decisions are being made to address PFAS issues. And now I'd like to introduce our community leaders of the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network. With us today, we have my friend, Cathy Wusterbarth from Oscoda, also my friend, Sandy Winstout from Belmont, and my friend as well, Robb Kerr from Ann Arbor. As the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network grows, we will continue to add community leaders from communities across Michigan and the Great Lakes region. Those interested in getting involved should visit our website at glpan.org. That's glpan.org. Now I'd like to turn it over to our first speaker, Cathy Wusterbarth.
Thank you, Tony. Good afternoon. I'm a co-leader of the Now Need Our Water Community Action Group. We were created in 2017 to give Oscoda and AuSable and surrounding communities a voice. In Oscoda, when we were told not to drink the water from our wells, eat the local fish, and had toxic foam forming on our lake shores, we were upset and scared. We had never heard the term PFCs, or now what we call PFAS. Certainly, these were new chemicals that were accidentally used and unintentionally spread in our community. Unfortunately, we learned that was not the case. Most of us, like me, never had to deal with an environmental contamination of their community and property. Initially, we looked to the polluter for answers, then to the regulating agency for guidance. We quickly learned we could not rely on those entities for reliable information or for action to protect ourselves and our community. Maybe this is a dramatic analogy, but sometimes I feel like a bomb was dropped on Oscoda. Living in Oscoda while the base was active, veterans and civilians always lived with the possibility that we would be a target for bombing from another country. But in 2016, it felt like a PFAS bomb was dropped by our own military, and we were in shock. We then desperately looked around to the others for help. We saw how some people and organizations took swift action, like those in Parchment and at Peace Air Force Base. And others, like our polluter, the US Air Force, and the regulator, the state of Michigan, sat on their hands, unable or unwilling to take action. We then partnered with those that were taking action and learned from them what to do next, where to find reliable information, how to be strategic in our actions, and how to advocate for ourselves. Even when we were promised we could receive help from the polluter and regulators, no real help came, even to this day. But now, as we have grown and our wounds from this PFAS bomb are starting to heal, we are gaining strength. We will not be ignored. I am relieved and proud to stand by these other community leaders as we have come together to ensure our federal and state agencies act now to clean up PFAS contamination in our water, land, air, and wildlife, and aid and care for the health of impacted victims of PFAS exposure here in Michigan and the Great Lakes region. Help has finally arrived. Thank you. And I'd now like to turn it over to my friend and community leader from Belmont, Michigan, Sandy Winstelt.
Thank you, Cathy. It's good to be here with everybody. My name is Sandy Winstelt, and I really am very excited to be here. I'm from Belmont, Michigan, and my story actually began about 5 years ago after my husband Joel died of liver cancer. It was the following year that I learned that our drinking water contained massive amounts of PFAS. And it was only then that I learned that we were unknowingly living across the street from a dump site that belonged to Wolverine Worldwide, and that they had filled all of those acres with tannery waste. And that contamination spread to the drinking water of my entire community for about 25 square miles. And it's not only spread to our drinking water, but it's spread to our rivers and to our streams and to the Grand, and I'm afraid it's spreading to the Great Lakes as well. Shortly after that, I learned that my blood has some of the highest levels of PFAS found. At that time, my neighbors and I got together and we realized that something needed to be done. We were frankly surprised that this was even allowed to occur, and we didn't know what to do. I think, like you've heard from Cathy and Tony, there's a moment of shock when this occurs to you. But I started to meet other people. I met Tony and I met Cathy. I met people in Parchment. I met people in Plainwell and Ann Arbor, and it kind of drove me to action. So in the past 5 years, my life has changed and I've learned a lot. I learned how to put air in my tires all by myself. I learned how to say per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. I learned about hydrogeology and about aquifers and aquatards and groundwater surface water interface and things that no typical citizen thinks they need to learn about. But I think the thing I learned most was that community members citizens have much more power and influence than we give ourselves credit for. We have the ability to change policy. And I learned that by standing together with other community members and being smart and being persistent, we truly can get some policy changed. As a group, we have that power. We can meet with decision makers. We can get some things accomplished, and we need to get things accomplished. This is a very persistent class of chemicals. These chemicals are not leaving, they're not evaporating, and these threaten our waters, the very thing that every person in this state and this area values the most are our Great Lakes. So I'm really excited that this Great Lakes PFAS Action Network can bring our communities together to voice our expectations, to move policy, and to help decision makers work with us and with others to fix this problem. I think each community has their very unique perspective and their story to tell. And I think we can help not only empower those communities to come together and to take action and to work towards solutions, but we can also be a resource for each other and support each other and provide some clear guidance on how they can make this better in their own community. I think we want simple things. We want to be told when there's even the suspicion of a problem. Just like my smoke detector goes off anytime I burn things, which is fairly regularly, it doesn't mean that there is a fire. It just warns me that there could be a problem. I think we need the state and federal agencies to take our health concerns seriously and get answers for those. I think we need clear communication with government agencies and people that are responsible for working with us so that we know what to expect and they know what we want. And most importantly, I think we need very clear accountability for polluters so that this burden does not fall on us as taxpayers, but falls on the people that have profited from making this. So I'm really excited to see where this leads us in the future. I think we have an amazing group that's small right now and that I hope grows to be bigger. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Robb Kerr from Ann Arbor so he can give his perspective on what's coming next.
Thank you, Sandy. It's great to be here with all of you folks. Good afternoon. My name is Robb Kerr, and I'm a 25-year resident and business owner in Ann Arbor, Michigan. As many of you may know, Ann Arbor draws our water, some of our water from the drinking water from the Huron River at Barton Pond. Barton Pond is known to be contaminated with PFAS chemicals from an industrial site up the river from us. PFAS was first detected in the city of Ann Arbor in 2014, and since, testing has shown varying levels of the toxic contaminant in our city's drinking water supply. The good news is that Ann Arbor tests for 11 types of PFAS and has readings now of non-detect or below the 7 Michigan PFAS regulated standard levels. This has been achieved by the taxpayers and the taxpayer expense, the installation of a filtration system. However, there are over as Tony has said, there are over 7,000 versions of PFAS. And to date, we're not testing for all of these PFAS numbers. Companies using one type of PFAS can switch from one to another that is not regulated and still be polluting our drinking water. Ann Arbor started the GAC system, which is a granular activated carbon system, to deal with a PFAS and PFOA. GAC is good for taking out long chain PFAS, but not so good for short chain versions. The issue has been of great concern for our community in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, as well as surrounding metro areas. While the city of Ann Arbor began doing monthly testing and with the use of the GAC systems for treatment of the city water supply, there is way more to be done. Regulation of all members of PFAS in the PFAS family of chemicals needs to be strengthened, and the polluter pay law needs to be strengthened as it should be, and it should not be a burden of communities to pay for profiting businesses' pollutions. We're only one community, The state of Michigan believes there are 11,000 sites in our state contaminated with some form of PFAS. This showcases that these chemicals are everywhere and can impact any community. It also underscores the need for action and for communities that are impacted by PFAS to come together to work toward a solution with our leaders to address this water contaminated crisis once and for all. I stand here today proud to be with all the community leaders you're meeting today in launching the PFAS Action Network to give a platform for impacted communities to work to protect our health and to protect our water. Thank you, and I will turn it back over to Tony.
Thank you, Rob. I'd now like to open the floor for questions from reporters. If you have a question, please raise your hand in the chat box and we'll turn on your mic so that you can ask it. So if you do have a question, we are happy to respond. Looks like we have a hand up. Nick, can you help me? Looks like there's a couple now.
Hey, Tony, it's Brett Dahlberg at WCMU. I wonder if you can just talk a bit about what good it does to have a bit of unity in these groups, or to be more than one group, and what your first aim is as a group.
Well, I think, Brett, and as you know, while I live in Southeast Michigan, my home and heart are in Oscoda. And if you take a look at what's happened in Oscoda over the last few years, we've gone from almost being a not even on people's radar screen to being kind of the center of a whole bunch of activity in Michigan and in the nation. And it's only because that we have, as Cathy mentioned, we've joined together with people like Sandy and Rob and others across the state. It's very easy to take a look at a small community and say, oh, it's too bad they have a problem there. But when it's Oscoda and it's Belmont and it's Ann Arbor and it's Detroit and it's Dearborn and it's Flint, it's much, much more difficult for folks to brush us aside. And I think that we've had a lot of impact already across the state of Michigan. Among other things, our governor, one of the first things that she did when she took office was to appoint a citizens advisory work group, which is, I think, unique in the country in bringing citizen voices to our state level. And so I know Cathy and I can go back to the days when we couldn't get anybody even to talk to or listen to us. And now that's changed pretty dramatically. And we think that by organizing formally this way, that we'll have a much broader platform to attract even more folks and to make an even bigger impact. So I think everybody here is really, really excited about the potential that we have going forward. And anybody else want to chime in on that?
I just have another thought on that, is that sometimes in communities, you feel sort of alone, and you may only have one or two other neighbors that have the time and the energy and the resources. So I'm hoping that this gives those kind of lone rangers out there that are in an impacted community a place that they can go to get some resources and some support as well, because it is a very time-consuming little process. So.
Thanks, Sandy. Okay, and looks like Suzanne has a question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yeah, I know you said your policy changes will be forthcoming, but I wondered if you could say anything, give us a hint as to what your top policy changes that you're going to be seeking are.
I think we can give you a preview, and I think that some of the speakers here who talked today kind of touched on those. I think one is, and Rob kind of drew on that fact, that we really shouldn't be regulating PFAS on a one-off basis with more than 7,000 chemicals in the class and growing. It's just backwards to take them one by one. We really need to regulate them as a class. And I think we also need to move, as I think I mentioned, to remove PFAS from commerce, except for its most essential uses, and there really aren't all that many. The best way to stop a problem and is to stop it right at the beginning, so that it's not out there in the environment to be there forever. And I think maybe the third general area, which is one that Sandy, I think, touched on maybe perhaps most in her talk, was bringing assistance, awareness, and help and treatment to people who have been impacted by PFAS contamination, to educate doctors and to help folks so they can go to their physicians and get meaningful guidance when they have these illnesses or when they're in these areas like those in which we all live that are heavily impacted by PFAS. For too long, many people will go to their doctors and their doctors won't even know what PFAS is. And so the next challenge is how to deal with it. So I think those are probably kind of the general areas. And again, if anybody else on our community leaders group wants to jump in here, please do so. Looks like we've covered it. Suzanne, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. Thank you.
Okay. And it looks like the next question is from John Flesher.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I was wondering if your plan is to focus on the state level, state regulation and legislation and that kind of thing, or will you be looking more broadly for a federal response? As you know, Michigan has some standards that have been set on the state level. The Biden administration has promised to look at that as well, but they have a ways to go through EPA. So what will your focus be? Both, or just focus mostly on Michigan?
Well, our focus will be on both. We think that the action has to occur at all levels. And frankly, the federal government has been too slow to act so far. We're fortunate in Michigan to have a congressional delegation that's very, very supportive of our positions and very helpful with the new administration. Some of us on this call have already been in talks with some fairly high-level people in the new administration in Washington. So we'll be taking action and looking on the national level, and to continue to partner with and work with our elected officials, our legislature, our governor, our attorney general here in Michigan to move this issue forward. It's an issue that's not just a forever issue; it's an everywhere issue, and it's an issue that requires really actions at all levels of government. Thank you.
I think we also have a hope that we can expand this throughout the Great Lakes. So, the states around us as well that we can join forces with, because it does us no good to protect the Great Lakes from Michigan if Wisconsin or Minnesota or Pennsylvania and those areas are not also implementing these things. So I think our hope is that we can make this not only a state force, but a regional force, and then a national force to be protective of our water. I think water is going to be the next big issue, and we have a responsibility because we've been given these lakes to really take care of this.
Thanks.
Looks like we may have another hand up. Yes, no? Okay. I guess we're going to have one last call for questions from any one of you in the audience who might like to ask any one of us whatever is on your mind. Okay, well, seeing no more hands, I'd just like to thank you all for joining us today. We've launched a website where more information about this new organization can be found. That's glpan.org. We'll continue to provide information and resources on our website as we grow and add more impacted community members to the network. And we'll be having some announcements coming forth. We're planning a pretty major event in August of this year. And just to give you a preview of that, there was a film produced by Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Sarah Ganim that's focused in Oscoda, but really deals with issues across the state and across the nation. It's called No Defense. And we'll be doing a 3-state screening of that movie in August. Details to come. So again, thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to working with you and chatting with you in the days ahead. Thanks.